What's up, guys? Joey here. So I've got a bit of a different video for everyone today. This is my PC setup with a Ryzen 5 5600X and a Deepcool AK620. And just to show, it is a standard ATX size case with mesh intake and triple Silverstone ultrafine dust filters at the front. And these are 1800 RPM, 70 CFM PCCooler Halo RGB fans, so you can look up the specs online. They are pretty decent. They have decent static pressure around 2mm, and yeah, that's just my cooling setup. There's 3 at the front and 1 in the top exhaust on the rear side of the cooler and 1 at the back. So just to show what the cooling setup's like, and the purpose of this video is I'm actually planning to upgrade the stock AK620 fans, which are very decent fans. Like I can run them max RPM and they're not really audible over my case fans at the profiles I run them at, but their static pressure tops out around 2 something. Like I'll bring up the specs and post that in the comments on the video, but it's like around 2.2, 2.3 static pressure at max RPM, and I'm planning to upgrade them to a pair of Scythe Wonder Snails, which go up. These are the 2400 RPM variant, and they go up to like 3mm static pressure, 3 mm H2O. And I'm going to use the same fan curves, which are actually set to top out at 100% over 70C. And now that might sound extreme, but my gaming temps are more like 50C. So it's more just to see if at max RPM on my current curve, if there is like a big noise increase or not, and how the temps, if there's any difference in load temps. So this is peak load temps. Obviously, gaming load is a different scenario and will have different noise readings. But just to give you an idea, I do have this dB meter set up for this test, and this is not like a high-end dB. It's not dBA, which is dBA is weighted for removing heavy heavy bass frequencies and things like that. So it's normalized for the human ear, but it's just a simple phone app that anyone can use, and that's the reason I'm using it. Is even though the other websites will have like special dBA metrics, I wanted to use something anyone can kind of grab, put next to their tower, and get a comparison for their own temps and compare it to mine. So this app is actually called Sound Meter. It's on Android Play Store. I don't know if it's on iPhone. And this is how it works. It gives you a description of how loud stuff is. So if I can just get that to focus, sorry, focus. There we go. I can't even hold it steady enough. But basically it moves around, and 10 dB is breathing, almost quiet. 20 dB is mosquitoes and rustling leaves. It kind of seems weird though, because 30 dB is what they call whispering or a quiet room. So I'm not sure if it means whispering in a quiet room, or a quiet room will also have a noise threshold of around 30 dB. But if I don't talk, like you can see that it's spiking constantly as I'm talking. It's set on a 0.4 ms response. If I don't talk, it stabilizes at around just under 30 dB. And that's right next to the tower, which I can audibly hear the fans, but it's a very soft hum of idle fans, which I don't mind. It means I know the computer's turned on, basically. It's not really intrusive to my computer usage or anything like that. I can watch content. If I turn my speakers on, it's completely different. Like the dB goes up way higher. But it's just to give you that reference point, around 30. And then I'll also switch it to this graph mode. And, you know, if you go louder, at 60 dB is actually a normal conversation when you're using a dB meter. So when you're measuring fans with like a dBA reading, they'll usually say that 30 to 40 dBA is starting to get audible and loud. But here, like a normal conversation, 60, and a vacuum cleaner 70. So just so you understand the scaling. And normal conversation is what it's spiking to now as I'm describing things, and it says normal conversation at 3 foot away. So that's pretty accurate, actually. And busy traffic, busy street alarm clocks is 70 and alarm clocks are at 80 dB. Power tools are at 90 dB. So, you know, I'd have to like yell to demonstrate that, but that's not the point. It's just to show, and then I'm just going to reset it here and show you this. Now, I do not live in a really quiet environment. I've got kids in the background that when they talk loud or they make a screaming noise, it'll come through the door. And then as well on the windows in this room, they're just simple thin glass. There's even dogs in the back that when they bark, it'll spike the dB meter. So what you're looking for when I run this test, because I'm not going to talk obviously during the benching, is you'll see the dB level out. And if you see any spikes, ignore the spikes. Just look at the maintaining level. So I'll give you an example here. I won't talk for a bit. And that's 20, the second number. But see how it spiked when I talked? And it's like really low. It sits at around 20 dB, maybe 25 dB as a normal non-talking reading. So it might not be that clear. I'll try wiping my camera again. Sorry. Like, I don't know if it's the camera. This is a Logitech C920, but it's very old. Just try wiping it. Sorry. Maybe it'll help. That helped a little bit. But yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run 10 minutes of Cinebench R23. And just to give you a little bit of information, my CPU is on a -28 all-core negative curve, which is stable. Like, believe it or not, it's stable. Like, look at how many videos I've put up in the past few months, and I've been running these exact settings. I do tweak them every now and then. Like, I was originally running -29 CO with tighter TDP, PBO limits, I should say, and it would throttle on the EDC. So if you don't know how that works, like PBO has limits, and the stock limits will throttle to a point where your actual clock speeds are closer to 4400 megahertz with stock PBO if you don't like uncap the limits. And then when you try to uncap it to let it use as much power as it wants so that you get the max boost speeds, your effective clock, which is basically taking into account power saving and power limit throttling, will increase to match at +0 megahertz on PBO, like without any PBO override, it should be boosting to 4.65 gigahertz. And I'll just quickly explain clock stretching. So when you have your normal clock readings you might see in an OSD in a game, like through MSI Afterburner, those are called discrete clock readings, and they are basically like a superficial clock reading that it's just what the CPU is reporting it's boosting to, but it's not including power states, it's not including sleep states, all of that stuff. It's not including core parking. It's just basically showing you it's either boosted it's trying to boost to its max rated frequency, or it's at a lower stepping, but it only will show you down to about 3.6 gigahertz for its lower utilization speed stepping. Like, it's not actually speed stepping, but that's just the best way I can describe it, is it steps down to a certain speed, but a discrete clock reading will only show you like a minimum of around 3.6. You won't actually see what the cores are parking to. So if you want to see core parking and understand how clock stretching works, when you power limit throttle because of PBO, like you might have your PBO limit set too low and you've enabled it, but your limits are down at like 80, 60, something like that, 80, 60, 90. Stock limits will actually only boost, because they'll power limit throttle, you'll only get effective performance around 4400 megahertz, and your Cinebench scores will be lower, your temps will be lower, which is great. But overall, you're actually clock stretching and not getting the full 4.65 gigahertz performance. Even if an OSD is showing you 4.65, you have to install hardware info and look at the effective clocks to see what you're actually getting and compare your Cinebench or your synthetic benchmark performance. So when you've eliminated clock stretching, when you put it into an all-core load, like I'll start now, the 10-minute test, when you eliminate clock stretching and you put the CPU under load, you'll see all of your effective threads hit within like a few megahertz of that peak frequency. But also background apps can affect it, so it might not always be perfect. Like if you're running too many background programs, I've got exit lag running, I've got Afterburner running, which I don't actually need running for this test. That will also affect the clock reading because it's using up CPU cycles. Is the best way I can explain it. So running this all-core load, you can see that I'm not getting any power limit throttling, and we're hitting 4633 on all threads in Cinebench R23, and we're going to do a 10-minute test and see what the temperatures peak out at. And we could see that the minimum temperature, which was basically cold boot, was 37 degrees, and now we're sitting at 76 degrees. And that's also the reason I was able to uncap my limits, is because on my old Deepcool Gamax Pro, if I tried to run it at the full 4.65 gigahertz, it would start pushing 80 degree plus, and I didn't really want that. But I feel like I'm staying within 80 degrees now. It's fine for an all-core load, and then in gaming load, it's down at like 50, even 45C for some games. So yeah, we're just going to test this. This is my current cooling configuration, stock AK620 fans, and the fan curve is set that the CPU cooler fans will actually hit 100% if the CPU exceeds 70 degrees. But they're tuned for gaming though, so just understand that. When I'm actually gaming, they never hit 70 degrees. They don't even hit 60 degrees, so the fans are actually closer to like 50 to 70%, and they're virtually inaudible. So anyway, I'll stop talking now, and I'll just leave this test going. This is just for reference, not just for myself, but for anyone that just might find it interesting. You know, like if you're planning to change your CPU cooler fans, is it worth doing? You might have an AK620, and I just have to show you all the parameters we're dealing with, and you can see here I'm getting about 1.25 volts on the under load, and the current is at around 119 amps on EDC. And the actual cap is at 120, but for some reason it's showing 95. I think I increased it to 125 actually. We're not going to look at the score though. The score is not going to be applicable because I'm running Relive and I've got a camera open. Like I'm using CPU cycles for other things, and that's just going to affect, getting a stable result. So I'm just going to quickly open Ryzen Master here and make sure I've listed the right limits, because sometimes I play with the limits. I just do my own little tweaking on the side. So they're not always exactly the same, but I do try to keep my my YouTube videos up to date with whatever specs I'm running. So we can see here I've actually got the EDC at 125. Sorry, that's why it's saying 95. I was like, that's a bit off. Maybe I just didn't update that properly from when I was testing a lower limit. But just to show that it's not hard throttling at 100% on anything. So 115 PPT, 75 on TDC. Sorry. 75. Glad I checked that because it's just misleading if it's wrong. And 125 on EDC is the actual what I'm running for minus 28 CO. And another thing to be aware of is, because there are people that will say like there's no way you can have a high all-core negative curve and be rock stable, right? Unless you have a really good chip. Maybe I do have a really good chip, but the other thing you got to take into account is what kind of overclock you're running, because if you add plus 200 on the PBO curve, like curve override, you'll boost to like 4.85 gigahertz. It actually throws off the voltage curve because adding PBO override boost here, even 50 megahertz, increases V-core, meaning it increases the whole voltage range across the curve. And you may be unstable at a certain voltage point, and that's why running a high negative can make it unstable, because you've affected the voltage frequency scaling. So that's just the best way I could describe it. So basically, I was running minus 28 with stock limits. Closer to stock, it was like 105, 60, 90, I think, originally. And I was clock stretching at like 4.4 gigahertz, something like that. And then I tuned it to unlock those limits. I actually wasn't stable at minus 29 anymore when I ran my, my benchmark suite and like ASUS Realbench, not Core Cycler, Thread Stepper, because that's what works with Windows 11. I ran a bunch of stress tests. And basically, I had to knock it down only one notch to minus 28 all-core to get it stable with the uncapped PBO limits. So capped, I was stable, and then uncapped, I was unstable until I lowered that. And yeah, if I was to add plus 50 to get this to boost to 4.7, we would easily see maybe some instability pop up, and I would have to lower this even further, maybe to minus 27 or minus 26. So it depends. And as you push the CPU harder, like I've seen people running plus 200 on PBO override, you actually need much more voltage. So your voltage, obviously a high negative curve offset, a high negative curve is going to cause instability much quicker. So just to give you that filler if you didn't know about those things. And now we're just going to let you see the reading. There's still 4 minutes and 40 seconds left on the test. So you will be able to at least see those values. And I'm going to turn my mic off now just to get it more accurate. Cheers.
My appetite. leave me high and dry. Oh, well, I don't wanna jinx it, baby, and twist myself at the spine. Don't wanna overthink it, baby. It's just twist your body and mine. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, but I don't wanna jinx it, baby. Let's not get ahead of my time. Oh, but I don't wanna miss you, baby. So I stand up and speak my mind. Oh. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're chilling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're channeling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, 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 oh,
Loading test. Let's see, did that even start? Just do a little quick test here, just to show you the all-core effective clocks, what they actually look like. And you can see they're slightly higher at the initial start of the test because past 70 degrees, the CPU will start to clock stretch a little bit on AVX workloads. There's like it's not really publicized, but there's some kind of soft throttle going on with AVX workloads. The higher you push over 70 degrees, the lower your effective clocks will go, even if normally you wouldn't be clock stretching on a non-AVX workload. So just to show you, though, it is still higher than the previous fans, than the stock FK120 fans. But yeah, just to show you that effective clock and what it looks like. Now I'm just going to stop that test for now. Just to quickly go over the differences with the fans, if I can bring them up. I have to close my camera. So the original fans on the AK620 are called the FK120. That's the actual model of them. And they have 2.19 Aqua, which actually is the same as H2O. So if you see, H2O, AQ, it's basically the same thing. And their peak speed, or CFM, is 69 CFM at 1850 RPM, which is virtually silent. And they do say that it's around 28 dBA, which is like a quiet room noise at level anyway. And that explains why I couldn't really hear them when I was running the max RPM over my other case fans that are slightly louder. So anyway, that's the specs. And then the actual Wonder Snails go up to 24 RPM, these ones. And they do get a fair bit louder, up to 29 dBA, and a couple dBA is noticeable. If you're used to a certain tone, you'll hear like a slight difference when the dBA is added. And their static pressure, though, goes all the way up to 3.59, which is like not double, but it is noticeably higher at 77 CFM. So the CFM is also higher. But one thing I'll point out, just in my initial, like after installing them, what I noticed straight away is they are audibly louder. Not annoyingly, though. It's just like an airflow noise, but it's slightly louder at idle. And that's just due to me running the same fan curve, like basically at the same PWM percentage for my max temperature of 100% at 70 C. At about 42 C, the Wonder Snails are on a higher curve because they're a higher RPM fan. So that just explains it. I could easily noise normalize it and like adjust it to be the same noise level. But what I wanted to do was just show how the plug and play performance is, you know, like just swapping it in, swapping it out, how they perform when stacked up against each other. It's a faster fan. It can run faster. Why wouldn't you try to take advantage of that? So just showing them running there, and I'm just going to set the color back to what I normally have. I just set it to white to show you guys. And we're also going to reset the sound meter, and I'm going to turn my mic off for this testing. Anything else I need to go over? Oh, the other thing I noticed as well is that I don't normally get any vibrations from the case to my table when running even at 100% RPM on the AK620, the stock fans. But what I did notice is when I touched the case with the FK120 fans, I did not really feel any vibration. At the current RPM curve that I've got on there now, like the same curve, I can feel the Wonder Snails causing some slight vibration in my case, but it's not annoying. Like it doesn't come through on my mouse pad, doesn't come through on the mouse on the table or anything. It's just something to point out. Like there is definitely a little bit more case vibration. So if you're sensitive to that kind of thing, or maybe you've got a really thin table, like my table's pretty cheap. It's just a it's just an office desk type of, you know, thin plywood type of table. So you can see here, it's just like that thin chipboard or whatever the heck it's called. But just to show, it's not really a sturdy table. It's not a thick table. But if you have like a hollow type of desk, maybe there's certain hollow tabletop designs that might transmit vibration. Something to be aware of. But again, not a big deal. It does come with vibrationing rubber, same as the FK120 fans actually come with little dampeners as well. And the dampening rubber on the Wonder Snails is actually thicker. Oh wait, no, these seem to cover the whole exterior. I don't know how much they go into the frame. Like when I'm looking in, they actually go along the whole edge of the frame on the FK120s, while on the Scythe they're kind of more, there's like a gap here that I can show you. There's like a gap there, and so the rubber is just on the ends. But anyway, enough of that. I'm just going to start the test again. So the non-recording score was 11,796 with effective clocks all the way up at 4646. So, you know, basically 4650. And so if you're using my testing or my performance as a reference point, that is what you should be seeing when you uncap the PBO, PPT, etc. limits. The only difference is if you're running a high plus override, or if you've just got a worse bin CPU that you can't run a high negative offset, or I don't know, some low frequency vibrations from the actual fan RPM, not noise, but vibrations and low frequency also get picked up on phone dB meters. So it's hard to get a super accurate reading. Wait, I'll just try something else. Because this is something anyone can replicate. You know, you can just get a sound meter on your phone and do the same thing. If you're curious about how loud it actually gets, you could put the phone right up. It is definitely louder than the FK120s. It goes up to 60. Oh no, around 50, sorry. But 1 foot away, it's like a quiet room level of noise, quiet library. If I put it in front of me, like I'm about four feet away from the computer, it goes down to, wait, just to show you. You can actually see it gives you a description of what each dBA, you know, within 10 dBA, what it actually would sound like. Breathing. Yeah, I don't know. I can still hear it though, so I don't know, like, human ears picks up sound differently to a dB meter, and it's not really a dBA reading, it's a dB reading, SPL.
I like to be educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my loneliness. I guess that ignorance is bliss. Take me back to before I knew. Rewind, take it out of cue. Innocence can be a young man's game. Signed up for the hall of shame. I wish I knew how much I miss not knowing that we're all screwed. Stay up, I feel so outdated. How can we look the other way? Sun is out, but the sky is gray. What would happen if I took a chance? It's always hard at first glance. I don't wanna, but I know I gotta do it. The truth is hard to swallow, I think I'll chew it. I knew.
Which is the same as the stock fans. So basically the heatsink's being overwhelmed, and it's got there's enough airflow, but the heatsink can only, from the cold plate and the CPU, can only transfer at a certain rate, and it's not a limitation of airflow, it's a limitation of the heatsink capacity and dissipation rate. It's dissipating it at optimal rate already. But yeah, the one thing I noticed was that after the test was done, it returned to the idle warm temps, which is around 42, 43 degrees. And I am in a 31C ambient room, so it's only like 10C over ambient. But it returned to that way quicker than I noticed on the FK120s. So that could have been the biggest benefit I noticed visually when looking at a temperature graph for the Wonder Snails over the stock fans. But I mean, that's not really something you'd want to pay $30 in fans for. You'd rather make sure your case cooling is optimal and you're not running a restricted front intake. So yeah, we're peaking around the same. Although it only went up to 78, then it went back down to 77. So it seems like, yeah, it's like 1 degree better at best. But still very interesting, and hopefully someone gets something out of this. So the dBA range for both sets of fans was 25 to 30, but audibly, from what I can describe, they do have a tone that is, I'm able to differentiate that tone a lot better, probably because they are slightly louder, and I can pick out the sound that's the Scythe Wonder Snails over my case fans. But yeah, it's not annoying at all. Like, I could actually try putting my mic closer to the computer. Maybe you'd hear it. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to come up. But that's the other reason part of the reason the computer's positioned sideways is because if you want to enjoy the view of your components, right, you're also going to get the most sound blockage from the solid glass panel, even though it's just tempered glass, compared to having like the mesh facing you where all the 3 intake fans are, or having it down on the floor where the top exhaust fans are kind of, their sound pressure is going to reach you. So 1 more minute left. Yeah, we stabilized around 77. It is definitely slightly better, but it's just so slight. Yeah. One other test I have to do that I did not include yet. I guess I will do some off-camera testing, and if I feel it's relevant, I'll tack it onto the end of this video. Is along with the 2 Scythe Wonder Snails, I also bought a Casaflex 140mm for my top exhaust, because originally, before I switched to all PCCooler fans, which are very great fans for 120mm budget fans, originally when I switched, I actually removed a Fantex Skiron fan, which is a 140mm fan that I had on the top exhaust. And what I noticed there is that it's not necessarily the airflow or the pressure, it's the fact that the 140mm fan covers not just the CPU cooler, but in the top of the case, it fits all the way along, if I can just show the top, it fits all the way along to cover part of the motherboard where it's pulling away heat from the VRM better. So you're not going to you get less of a heat pocket with a 140mm fan, as opposed to a 120 that it's not really covering the CPU cooler and the motherboard area. So yeah, that test is done. And look, we're already returning. If you look at just earlier on the stock fans, I swear we are returning to the idle temps much quicker. It was a bit slower with the FK120s. I think it could just be placebo. And you can see we peaked at 54 on the VRM. That'll be another thing to compare if there was a noticeable, wait, I'll just do that now. If there was a noticeable difference in, wait, I'm just going to skip to the end of this. The score came up. This is the video that I just recorded, so I'm recording. These are going to be snipped together, so you've already seen this part. But I just want to put them side by side a little bit and read them out to you. So at the end of testing on the max temps in 31C Ambient, right, and we're still in 31C Ambient even though it's 2 hours later, we had a peak VRM MOS of 56, and our VRM MOS is down at 54 now. And the PCH and system, which is, I believe that's somewhere on the chipset, but they were the same, 41, 41. So the VRMs are getting slightly more indirect, but they're still getting some more active airflow for it to drop a couple degrees. And the peak temp 78 was also 78. L3 cache, well, I don't even know why that's there, because that's on that should be on the chiplet, but L3 temperature is 49, IOD hotspot 46, 46. Yeah, I'm expecting all of that to be basically the same. All the power consumption was basically the same. maybe because it was stabilizing at a slightly better average, I think. Like I was seeing 77 more, and I swear it was holding 78 on this one. Yeah, you can see. Oh no, 77. Let me just skim through a little bit. 78, 78, 78. Yeah, it got to a certain point in the test where it was sitting at 78 towards the end. How did that come up? And that seemed to affect the maximum frequency or the VRM, because you know it's not super expensive board, but even a couple degrees on the VRM can sometimes affect. In my own testing, it could be placebo again, but I've noticed that when my VRM temps are better, sometimes my effective clock will be more stable. I don't know. It could be a power delivery thing. The VRMs aren't super great on the B450M Mortar Max compared to B550 and X570 boards, but that's another thing. But yeah, just to share the data with you guys and kind of give you something to go off if you were wondering about is it worth upgrading the fans. And personally, if I could go back and I knew this data, I wouldn't. But now that I have, it's not like I would sell the fans and go back to the stock fans. They are slightly better, and I have to test the gaming loads. So that's the other factor I have to go into. I am expecting that the lower RPM range will be more efficient with these fans because of the static pressure rating. So yeah, it looks like a one. It's a bigger difference on the VRM actually. Like if sorry, I even had it in the wrong part of the video. I should have had it at the very end in the max peak temps. But as you can see here, 56 on the maximum for VRM MOSFETs, I think it is, but 54. So a couple degrees and roughly the same everything else. So the stock fans are pretty decent actually, all things considered. They're a good match for the AK620. So the bigger difference now will be to see if getting the better coverage will improve any other temps. The better coverage with the Casaflex 140, and this thing is a beast. Like it feels like a tank. When I feel these blades, they do not feel flimsy at all. It feels like solid plastic, like thick, heavy-duty plastic is what it feels like. Even if I tap my finger, I don't know if you can hear this. Wait. Even if I tap like my nail on the blade, you can just hear like a cheap fan won't sound like that. I don't know if you can hear it though, because my mic is good at blocking out noise. Anyway, kind of like getting off topic there. So if there is a noticeable, I am going to test it in the same scenario. Like I'm going to actually throw this in and do the same exact test, but I don't know if it's worth adding on the end of a CPU fan test. But if there is a notable difference, I will tack it on just so you guys can see. So yeah, if I don't, then thanks for watching, and I hope this helps you guys out. And just as a reference, if you're wondering about my case, it is a Philippine-made case by a brand called Rakk. It's also in Malaysia. I think the Malaysian brand is called Invasion. It's like called the Invasion H2, and it's only like around 40 or 50 US dollars. This case, it's not expensive, but in terms of airflow, it is a beast. Which is like, just putting it lightly, for what you get for the price. It has a hinged door, which is more of, not a high-end, but it's more of a new case feature. So a lot of the premium newer cases don't actually have hinged doors. It's only like recently come on, but this case had it early. It was one of the first hinged door mainstream cases, at least in the Philippines, mainstream in the Philippines, on the market. So it's got the hinged door that can, you know, lift off easily. But the biggest thing I noticed that a lot of premium cases, only the newer ones have it, and they're usually very expensive, is this front panel, like removability, so that you can access the front for cleaning, and you can add your own filters in, which I've done. I've got Silverstone ultrafine filters, and I highly recommend if you're running those crappy mesh filters that come with cases, like they'll usually come on the top exhaust. If you're running a mesh filter with circular holes and it's black, and you put your hand on the other side of it and you can't see your hand, that is an air restriction. Like they will trap heat in the top of your case. So if you're running a top one, like you can see mine's off because the system's running, you know, replace the empty spot if you do have one with an ultrafine filter. And on exhaust, you don't need to have you don't need a filter on your exhaust because air is blowing out all the time when the system is running, and then chuck your filter back on when the system's not in use. But even then, if you leave, like I never put my filter back on and I get minimal dust because any dust that does happen to settle on the top is going to get blown away. Like if it lands on the blades, if it lands anywhere here, it's going to get blown out as soon as the fans turn on. So that's not a big deal. And the majority of dust is going to come in the front, which is where you need better filtration. Somewhere here, maybe. Yeah, here we go. CPU. It's currently idling around 1700 RPM, and that is not. It's just a slightly different tone, but it's about the same noise level as my PCCooler Halo RGB fans. So that's interesting. And I think the RGB fans are on. Is it on the System 3 header? No, one of them's really fast. It's mine, because I've actually got, I don't know if you guys can see it. I've actually got a GPU heatsink in there. Let me put all this stuff back on. I've actually got a thin heatsink with two fans on it to go up to 5000 RPM, like a miniature backplate heatsink. Or maybe. Yeah, you can see the heatsink now. So there's two tiny, I think they're like, I don't know how many millimeter fans, but it's like, if you look up GPU backplate cooler, it comes with a little thermal pad, and you can just sit it directly on top of your, high-end graphics card. Like this is a RX 6700 XT, and it's kind of just a plug-and-play type of thing, and it lowers the VRAM temps by about 5 degrees under heavier gaming loads. And I've just plugged it directly because the only downside is this thing gets in the way of the PCIe eject button. So if I ever want to take the graphics card out for whatever reason, if I route this cable into the case and I have to remove this thing to get to the switch, then it's going to get in the way. So I just leave it outwards, like it's just hanging here, the fan cables. But they're plugged into the system header underneath, so it's easy to remove. But anyway, oh yeah, and one other feature of this case, like, sorry if I'm kind of going off topic here, is it also comes with a little GPU support bracket that is adjustable from the side panel side. Like you can screw it to whatever height you want, and it works. Like it holds the GPU level when there's a slight bit of sag on the end. So yeah, that's another thing. I don't know, like not all, even high-end cases don't always have that feature. It's just weird. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'm going to get onto this other testing and see if I can get any other improvement with a better top exhaust fan, because I've got the triple intake pressure coming in, and then the exhaust pressure is only 2 fans, which I'd prefer to have positive pressure because that prevents dust buildup, but I could still benefit from a little bit more negative pressure, like to remove heat. So it might help with the cooler efficiency because there's all this heat buildup in the CPU cooler area. Alrighty guys, so I got the Scythe Flex installed, and we did get a slight improvement. The CPU temp went down 1 degree for the full 10-minute duration at the same 31C ambient, and we got a more noticeable 3C reduction, which is what I was talking about, due to having more coverage over the motherboard VRM area. Like the fan's wider, so it's not just sitting on the back of the CPU cooler, it's actually over the VRM a bit, and that definitely helps. So there was a 3C temp drop on the VRM MOS. So yeah, it's not really a big deal, but if you're choosing between 120 and 140 for top exhaust, then definitely 140 gives you more space and can prevent what I'm guessing is a small heat pocket where the heat isn't, well, it'll still rise out, but it can be exhausted more effectively with a wider fan. So it's kind of like not exactly something that is mentioned in a lot of the fan comparison videos. Anyway, thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe if you found this content good. Cheers.